Let's start off by introducing Svetlana. Svetlana is an experienced adult ESL professional with special interest in best practices in adult ESL literacy, blended learning, and professional development. And she is a PBLA lead and a language instructor at a LINC program in Toronto. She is also a prolific contributor to the digital world and is part of many people's personal learning network. Without any further ado, I will switch over the slides here and let you have at it there, Svetlana. Here you go.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Catherine, for your support and technical assistance. Hello, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like just to do a quick audio check with you. Can you all hear me all right? If you could just type in the chat box so I can see. Can you hear me? Yes, excellent. Perfect. So, as you probably know, my name is Svetlana. I teach Adult ESL Literacy at Thorncliffe Neighborhood Office. I'm passionate about best practices in teaching adults with conventional literacy needs and interrupted formal education. I'm also passionate about connecting with practitioners across the country and establishing a practice of support and collaboration. I'd like to thank all of you for joining me at Realize 2015 and dedicating your time to our collaborative professional development. And I'd really love to start with the group introductions. And if you could just type in the chat box what levels or CLBs or programs you teach, if any. Is there any special interest that you have in Adult ESL, or maybe a teaching puzzle that you have been trying to solve? So what levels, what CLBs, what your interests are in the area of Adult ESL? Any teaching puzzles? So far I can see Mary, CLB 2, Cola, CLB 3, Literacy in Phase 1 for Sue. Irene, CLB 4, Literacy Stream. So a lot of literacy and low levels, so excellent. I'm going to switch off my video now so we could all concentrate on the slides, and to give you an opportunity to keep an eye on the chat box. And I've already mentioned that in my experience, the best ideas, the best materials are shared through discussions in the chat box. And I hope to come back at the end of the presentation for questions and a discussion. So I'm going to do this now and see. Okay, so today I'd like to share with you my experience on, sorry about this. Today I'd like to share with you my experience on implementing reflective learning and teaching practices consistent with PBLA framework in Adult ESL Literacy classroom. I hope that in this session, we will be able to zoom in on the reflective learning activities such as the needs assessment, goal setting, informed task design, and self-evaluation techniques, as well as trace a connection between these classroom activities and developing a higher sense of self-efficacy for learning in Adult ESL literacy learners. And self-efficacy has been my personal puzzle for a little while. So, and hopefully evaluate the role of reflecting teaching in all of this. Self-efficacy for learning is the beliefs that we all have in our abilities to succeed on certain academic tasks. These beliefs are important since they can have both self-enhancing and self-debilitating influence. It is assumed that learners with high self-efficacy are likely to see themselves successful on the classroom tasks and therefore are excited to learn new skills, accomplish new tasks, get promoted to the next level. whereas learners with low self-efficacy tend to anticipate failure for themselves and naturally try to avoid situations which they think may reveal their challenges. In my experience, I have a consistent issue with promoting ESL literacy learners just because they do not want to move to the next step. So I have been exploring the definition of self-efficacy in order to solve this puzzle. In learning, self-efficacy is an important step towards self-regulation and learner autonomy. So to set the context of today's workshop, I'd like to address the question why teaching adult ESL literacy is different and what the specific challenges are. And first, I'd like to ask you to type in the chat box what your thoughts are on this. To help you, my questions are, what are the differences between teaching an adult ESL literacy and a mainstream or general ESL program? Is there any difference in curriculum or approach to teaching? What do you think the challenges are regarding learners' ability to self-direct their learning in the adult ESL literacy context? The amount of time needed to complete the task, I absolutely agree with this, and I'm going to speak about this a little bit later on in the presentation. Slower pace. It takes much more time and effort for ESL literacy learners to progress, and the progress may not be always visible to them. Pace. They lack learning strategies. I absolutely agree with this. They have fewer learning strategies, lack of resources for teachers. I'd like to introduce my class to you. There are 15 learners from 20 to 70 years old. It is a mixed ability group, but all of them are literacy stream. At the moment, the majority of the learners are at the foundation and phase 1 of the ESL literacy proficiency. In terms of their oral English, it's a beginner group, CLBs 1 and 2. So all of my learners either did not attend school in their home country or had completed just few years of formal education, usually up to 3. Therefore, as you have already mentioned, they either lack basic literacy and numeracy skills in their first language, or these skills are underdeveloped to be successfully applied or transferred in their ESL study and daily life. It is clear that ESL learners without previous formal education may not have learning strategies in place, may not know how to learn effectively, may not be able to identify their learning needs, and may not know how to collaborate in the classroom environment. We often rely on reading and writing to support our learning. If we cannot remember, we take notes. If we do not understand, we read it up. ESL literacy learners are not able to do this. They are not able to use the skills and may not even know how to hold a pen to begin with. So the simple fact that these learners did not spend enough time in the classroom environment would mean that they may get tired easily at the desk and would need an often change of activities to keep them focused and engaged. So we are going to talk about the following activities that are essential to PBLA framework and, in my opinion, contribute to developing self-efficacy beliefs and ability to self-direct learning in an adult ESL literacy context. So these are the needs assessment, goal-setting techniques, informed learning activities, and self-evaluation. During our session, I've planned for a few brief checkpoints for questions after each item on the agenda. So we will be able to look at the section-specific questions during that time. If you have more questions, if there is more interest in the topic, I believe there will be a bit of time at the end of the session. Or you can always contact me after the session by email or Twitter. So I'd like to mention that in this presentation, I have used images from pixabay.com. It's a great public domain resource, and I'm just going to share it in the chat box, pixabay.com. I would highly encourage you to check it out if you haven't already, except for the photos of the classroom and all the materials which are my own. I would also like to mention that all the materials are developed by me, and it's work in progress. And if you have any feedback, suggestions, observations, I would love to hear from you. The materials that I will be sharing with you are oriented towards Phase 1, Canadian Language Benchmarks, ESL for Literacy Learners. And let's start with the first point on our agenda, the needs assessment. Hello, Shafak. It's my colleague, so welcome. Adult learners are motivated to learn and succeed when what they study is related to their individual needs. Therefore, it is important to create a learning environment in which adult learners with basic literacy needs will interact with the language that is relevant to their lives and the context that are familiar to them. The challenge is that adult ESL literacy will most likely lack the ability to identify, prioritize, or express their own language learning needs. Adult ESL literacy instructors can contribute to building this ability by providing consistent opportunities to exercise individual needs assessment. It is essential to start a new term with the activities focused on identifying the needs of the learners, but then it's not less important to provide consistent opportunities to review the needs within reasonable periods of time. How about you? A quick poll for the chat box. Do you do the needs assessment with your learners? When? How often? Please share your answers in the chat box. When do you do the needs assessment with your learners? How often? What has been your experience so far? At the beginning of the month topic, week 1 or more formal 1 and week 2, okay? Formal at the start of the term, ongoing. At the beginning of each theme, before starting the course, a ranking activity, but mostly got all-important teacher. Yes, Jen, I would totally agree with you. And who can blame them? In the new language, everything seems important and essential. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So obviously, we cannot expect adult literacy learners to be ready to perform a needs assessment as we formally know it. In other words, it is impossible to perform the needs assessment with these learners by simply filling in a form questionnaire. There is a need to engage learners in a series of activities that would gradually develop their understanding of what is expected of them, prioritizing the needs among multiple difficulties that they may have, ability to communicate what they want to learn in class to their instructor, and grow more confident regarding their learning decisions. You know, at the beginning, when I just started teaching literacy, and I experienced this huge problem with the needs assessment, so I decided I am lucky enough to work in a multi-service agency, in a multicultural environment where we have colleagues and coworkers who speak almost all languages in the world. So I thought, if I just had a colleague who would help me interpret and translate the needs assessment questionnaire for my learners, then the problem will be solved. And, you know, to my utmost surprise, I realized that the translation actually did not help at all. And similar to what Jen has just mentioned, even if the questionnaire was translated for the literacy learners, they still wanted to learn everything. They told me that everything was important and they did not want to miss anything. So at that point, it became clear to me that a different approach was necessary and that something else may be going on there. So in my class, the needs assessment usually takes some time, a few days, even a couple of weeks. I try to set it up in a way that learners are engaged in the activities that are meaningful and interesting to them. So in needs assessment, I have identified a few areas to help me and to focus on that will provide the learner and the instructor with enough information to proceed to the goal setting. I have used the activities that reveal literacy and numeracy needs, the skills that learners want to practice, information about their previous learning experience, how they like to learn, and their communication needs. Calendar has been a very useful tool of the literacy and numeracy needs assessment and learning management. I print an individual copy for each student, usually for a year. I will try to zoom in this picture for you so you can see what else is here on this slide. Okay. So each time a new student arrives to class, I start with a calendar. I interact with the learner, ask questions, try to see whether the learner can find today's date, knows months and days of the week, can copy the date, can navigate the text from left to right, understands tables, charts. So afterwards, the calendar becomes an indispensable part of our daily routine. First thing in the morning, when the learners are arriving to class, we check today's date, review what date was yesterday. Yes, this is very essential. See what date will be tomorrow. Check in by circling or checking off today's date. Check the weather. Learners have been successfully using their mobile devices to check the weather app. Record today's temperature on the calendar. On the last day of the week, learners can review their weekly attendance and compare the temperatures. I have volunteers who are recording the date on the whiteboard each day, and by the end of the month, learners review their attendance and record it in the space at the bottom. And I'd like to draw your attention to my attendance at the bottom of the page of the calendar, days present, days absent, and then they have to check off the box excellent, good, needs improvement. And this feature you can easily add and create a template like this using a Microsoft Word Office. So if the attendance is not satisfactory, there may be a reason. It's always good to talk to the learner, find out what the reason is and whether help is needed, to avoid bad things before bad things happen. Okay, we're going to move on to the next slide, and I'm just trying to zoom it just a little bit. So the needs assessment activities may be very teacher-centered in the beginning, since the learners are often confused about their language needs or simply may not have the language to express what they need or want to practice in class. In my experience, in the beginning, learners typically want to learn about everything, and you have just confirmed this in the chat box, which is, I think, very natural. As in the new country, in the new language, everything is unknown, may seem very important. So I would recommend introducing a glossary of terms as a starting point to prepare our learners for the activities that require the use of the meta language. So on this slide, I'd like to share with you two samples of glossaries, language skills and instructions. In my practice, I have been trying to consistently utilize the same images, and I hope you'll be able to notice it on the materials that I'll be sharing down the road and the corresponding meta language, and thus encourage my learners to refer back to these glossaries and use the vocabulary as much as possible in order to develop their confidence in expressing what skills, what activities they want to practice in class. So, and also to make the best use of the resources that I develop for them. The glossary of skills asks learners to identify one skill that they want to work on in in class, and it can also become a part of the needs assessment exercise. So as you can see on the picture from the classroom, my learner is referring back to her skill glossary to fill in the learning log template. And I'm going just to zoom in a little bit on this to show you some specific features. So this particular glossary of skills has been very successful with my learners. It is very simple. For it to be effective and for you to succeed with teaching them the language that is important in reflective learning, you would have to constantly refer them back and forth to these materials. And every time you start a new activity, you would ask them, okay, so what skill is it? What do you think? What skill is it? Is it a listening or a reading skill or writing? And with practice, with consistency, you'll see how many of your learners will be able to grasp it and will be able to identify the skills individually. And as an example here, a learner of mine is completing her weekly log, and what she has been doing, she has been checking the skills on the glossary that she has used in the beginning of the term to identify the skill that she wants to practice. So there's one more remark I want to make, is that to get here at this point where learners are consistently and extensively using their materials, you need to provide that support to them. You need to teach them how to do this. So you will need to direct them, telling them, okay, where can you check this? Do we have any materials? Or just specifically point to the materials a few times, and then they will be able to do it on their own, hopefully, not all of them, but some of them. So those who grasp it will be able to help their colleagues who are not there yet. Okay, and I'll have to minimize this one here. What we want to know and what's important to know is whether the learner had any previous formal education experience, whether he or she can read, write in the first language or second language and not necessarily English, whether they have used the computer before, or more specific details such as whether they know the letters of the alphabet and so on. You may discover some very interesting and useful details about learners through these activities. These activities are very simple, and I think if you have access to an interpreter or to a coworker who speaks the language, you can use them. There is nothing wrong with it. It is also important to find out how many years of formal education, if any, were completed. For example, there's significant difference, and I'm sure the literacy teachers know this, between the learners who did not attend school at all or completed just 3 years or 9 years of education. So to benefit the most from these materials and activities, learners must be prepared and engaged. So therefore, we can start with the vocabulary, and I want to emphasize it to you that vocabulary, developing vocabulary, is actually the foundation of the literacy skills. Elicit the words that learners already know. I like labeling the pictures together with them. Do the activities orally as many times, as much as necessary for them to be familiar with what's going on, and then proceed to the formal part where the learners review the questions and circle their answers. And remember, it doesn't happen to be done in one single day. I would suggest as a follow-up activity, comparing the answers with a partner in a small group or discussing them with the instructor. And this, I just want to zoom in on this material. So the first one on the left, I read and write in my first language, say yes or no. And there is another one with the alphabet. So I can say the alphabet, circle yes or no. I can read the alphabet, I can write the alphabet, I can understand the alphabet. And there's one with the computer, I can type yes or no, and this will give you an insight where they are with the computer skills. You may be surprised to find out that they read or write in a second language different than their first language and other than English, or they can actually type. So let's proceed to the next one. Another group of questions refers to the learning preferences. The information obtained from this exercise can help us create the favorable conditions for this particular learner and therefore reduce the stress of the learning experience. For example, the fact that the learner indicates that he or she likes to work with a partner or in small group will tell us that this learner is not ready for individual work just yet. This information can also be used to determine the needs in terms of class interactions. For example, if the learner, let's say, prefers to work alone all the time, then it's important to encourage and motivate this learner to engage in pair group work and develop his or her ability to interact with others in learning in real life. In order to be effective, literacy instruction will go beyond just simple reading, writing, and numeracy. And nowadays, it must include developing behaviors and attitudes that will allow the adult learner to succeed in learning and settlement. And working in a group, working in a partner, with a partner, is certainly very important life skills. And yeah. So I will try to zoom in here, and on the left, you can see a one-page handout, I like to read alone, and you can see that it has been labeled by the learner. So there has been a lot of work done till we got to the point where the learner had to circle actually yes and no. There's another one on the top right where you can see a group, and this group is reading, and this is a picture from pixabay.com. So I like to read in a group and circle yes or no. And once again, you don't start with the handout, but you start with the vocabulary and eliciting what is this, it's a group, and do you like to read in a group, and circling their answers. And this is a picture from the classroom, and I would highly encourage you, if your learners are okay with this, to use as many as possible pictures from the classroom for the needs assessment activities, for the learning reflection activities, because it speaks to the learners. Learners can relate to it. They recognize themselves in this picture. So I like to work on the computer. Circle yes or no. It may seem that the easiest of all would be to find about a topic of interest. However, in my experience, learners are often confused because they think that all the topics are important and also may not be able to decide on one. I have seen learners choosing a topic just because they saw that their neighbor have chosen it. The difficulties associated with the needs assessment activities must not discourage us at all. The trick is that we should not expect our learners to be proficient at identifying their needs. We should not expect our needs assessment to be perfect. There is something that I've understood after teaching literacy and exploring literacy for a significant amount of time. Our role as teachers is to provide consistent opportunities for learners to gradually build their ability to identify, prioritize, and focus on their language learning needs. When we think about needs assessment, we tend to base it on our own expectations, but we should not. It may not happen at the first try and may even take longer than just one class, but with consistency in approach and focus on the learner. And believe me, I know this. I've tried this in the classroom. I've seen results. Each time the needs assessment will be more meaningful and it will become more accurate. As a follow-up activity in our class, we like doing peer surveys, and I've talked about this before. I'd like to show you a few samples here. I personally believe this is a great way to learn about each other while developing literacy skills. Basically, learners have to talk to each other in class to fill in the chart. At this point, learners have practiced the questions orally. remember, always do orally first, are very well familiar with the language and therefore are able to complete the charts. In my experience, learners greatly enjoy these surveys. It gives them additional listening and spelling practice and also an opportunity to get to know each other better. I love them too. These charts can be easily modified to add or reduce the complexity of the task. So here are a few examples for you. And if you're wondering if you could use my materials, I have prepared a PDF document with all the materials that I am showing to you today. And I will be more than happy to email them to you if you need them or interested. So this is another, what's your name? Where are you from? What is your first language? And what we do in the class after that, all practice that we've already done, learners will mingle with their classmates, will talk to as many people as possible. Some of them will hesitate. Some of them will need that first push from you, just maybe persuade them to approach that colleague, and they would talk to each other, and they will ask questions, and they will help each other filling in the charts. And here in this handout, I would also want to draw your attention to the images that I am using, and I have been using them consistently. So when my learners see this little image with two people, they already know that this is ask and answer questions with a partner. When they see the pencil, they know it's right, and it helps their reading skills. They are able to read because before they proceed to reading, they understand it. All right. We move on, and we have just arrived to our first checkpoint for questions and discussion. And first, let me ask you a question. I am always looking for more ways to connect the dots between the learning that is happening in the classroom and the real lives of the learners. So my question for you is, what real-life activities can you think of in which the learners can apply the skills that they develop during the classroom-based needs assessment? So what real-life things, activities, experiences could you relate to the skills that learners develop during the classroom-based needs assessment? Type in the chat box. How can you bring real life into the classroom? Going grocery shopping, absolutely. And this is irrelevant. Going to the doctor. Meeting with tutors. Actually, my question would be more, where do you think in real life learners will be able to apply the skills that they develop during consistent needs assessment in the classroom? So there are lots of great ideas: answering the telephone, talking with neighbors, visiting the public, prioritizing work in the future, visiting the coffee shop, actually setting priorities for themselves. This will be the foundation for further goal setting. All right. Ordering dinner, menu selection. This is a good one. Love it. Thank you for sharing. So I'm going to move on now. And we have finished talking about the needs assessment. And I'd like to proceed with the second item on our agenda today, the goal setting. And it is said that learners without goals are like boats without ruders. They do not know where they're going, so they might never get there. Setting goals is certainly an important learning management and life skill. In the classroom, some goal-setting activities should be done in the beginning, following the initial needs assessment, while others may be implemented throughout the term. Quick question for you, the chat box, please type, have you been practicing goal-setting activities with your learners? If yes, how did you do it? Please type in the chat box. Have you been practicing goal setting with your learners? How have you done it? Yes, I see some yeses. It's a good start. Goal setting is an important step towards developing self-efficacy beliefs, an ability to self-motivate and direct own learning. So at this point, I'd like to emphasize that for goals to work, they need to be realistic, they need to be attainable, and they need to be proximal. So clearly, adult literacy learners will need a substantial support in setting and expressing their language learning goals. I do not really have a one-size-fits-all solution, but instead I'd like to share with you a few things, a few ideas that I've tried in the classroom to facilitate the goal-setting process to support my learners on it. Just trying to make it slightly bigger here. Okay, so if we look at the goal setting as a one-off formality to fill in the portfolio, then I can assure you the results will not be satisfactory. I find that embedding goal setting into instructional cycle, although may take time and effort on behalf of both the teacher and the instructor, will pay high dividends overall. Following the needs assessment, when the topic of interest has been identified, I make a small list of possible goals that are achievable, proximal, and relevant to the learner's level of literacy and language proficiency. So I do not expect my learners to be able to identify or express their goals or set their goals just yet. You can see an example of such a list on the left. So I'm going to maximize it a little bit for you here. So this is what I like doing with my learners. I'm giving them a choice rather than asking them to set a goal, which is impossible at this point. So, and I use usually 4 skills for them to focus on. Then the learner is required to identify one goal to start with. This choice will depend on different factors, learner's priorities in terms of the language skills, interests, or ability to understand what is required in this exercise. I always encourage the learners to make the best use of their learning resources. For example, going back to the glossary of skills, the one that I've mentioned before, and check the skill that they want to improve. Then identify it on the suggested list of goals. See if they want to develop this particular ability or may wish to do something else. I'd like to emphasize that when learners get to the stage where they need to interact with the handout, it is very important that they are already equipped with the vocabulary that will allow them to comprehend the information on it. If they don't understand it, it will not do them any good. It will be useless. Once the goal has been chosen, it is a good idea to go back to the learner's calendar, check today's date, record the date, and identify a date in the future that will serve as a deadline for the proposed goal. And if learners are choosing just one skill to start with, 1 week would be an appropriate period of time for deadline. So having a deadline makes the process more exciting and adds to the dynamics of learning. So I would suggest revisiting the goal, let's say in a week, to see whether it has been achieved, choose a new goal, or practice some more if there is a need. So for the record, in the learner portfolio, learners are asked to fill in a template on the right. I'm going to show it just in a second. So this is the latest one that I've been using with my learners. So please remember that all of this is work in progress, and I'm constantly updating my materials when I see how learners respond to them. So my learning goal at the top, and then they have to write the name, today's date, which is no problem for them because we constantly do this every single day. They can copy the goal from the previous goal setting handout. My goal is to learn to, or just simply it could be my goal is, and then copy, choose the skill that they have identified that is associated with the goal, date of goal review, this future date, the deadline, and how much time they have. So, for example, 1 week or 2 weeks. And remember that numeracy is an important part here too. And asking literacy learners at phase 1 to do the simple numeracy activities to, for example, count how many days are left for it in class to achieve their goal is a very useful exercise. And on this little picture here, you can see that this learner is completing her template, and she has used her resources such as a calendar to fill in the dates and identified a week, two weeks, and then what she wanted to learn about. So, you know what, just to give you an idea, I also started with very, very general goals. When I just started PBLA my class, I thought that learning about Canadian provinces and territories is enough of the goal or good of a goal. But now I realize that goals have to be more specific than that. And in this case, I need to support my learners as much as possible. So now I'm switching to the goals as introduce myself at the reception desk or write my first and last name. And this is in a proximal, realistic, and achievable goal here. Okay. Go into the next steps. So what I like most about revisiting goals is that if it's done consistently, regularly, at appropriate time intervals, it becomes a tool to actively engage learners into the lesson module program planning. So on the slide, you can see an example of a goal statement review that I've used with the learners to assist them to keep record of what has been achieved so far and whether the deadlines have been met. So I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible and simplify it as much as possible. And then here, learners know that they have to read and they have to write something, and they already know the skills. They just have to go back to their resources and see what they've done. They have to check off the box if they have achieved my goal and if they haven't achieved it. So here, I'd like to draw your attention to this next steps box, and this is a simple idea that I borrowed from someone else, and it has been invaluable in creating a space for me to for me to have a dialogue with the learner regarding what's next on the learning agenda. So if the goal has been achieved, we could ask guiding questions to assist the learner to identify or clarify what is that the learner wants to achieve next. For example, they learned to write and to write their first and last name, and you can ask them, what's next? What's next? What do you want to learn to write next? And you'd be surprised that they will come up with, I want to practice my address, and they will give you this input into your lesson planning. You can write a few ideas in the space provided and then plan for communication tasks, learning activities, games, role plays, dialogues accordingly to address the new goals of the learner. So this way, there's sort of continuity in the learning process. The goal setting is embedded in the ongoing lesson planning, and the curriculum as a whole is driven by the emerged needs of the learners. And I just love it, because before I was deciding for them what we were going to learn next, and now I just constantly getting this feedback, input. They are the ones who are moving us forward with our program. So learner, now I'm going to make a very, very important point that learner goals must be used as the foundation for the self-evaluation following the review. It's always best practice to do the evaluation against the previous self-set goals rather than evaluate against someone else's performance. Okay, so here we are. And how about you? My question for you is, what real-life activities can you think of in which our learners can apply the skills that they developed during the classroom goal setting? And I'm just going, Catherine, yeah, I'm following. I will be okay. I hope so. I'm just going to give you a very nice example that happened to us. I teach mainly women. So in one of the conversation with the class, we found that one of our young mothers of two children, 4 and 2, sorry, we found out that the children were put to bed at 2 a.m. in the morning. And it was partly because she had too many errands to run. Her husband worked shifts and they put children to bed together after he arrived home past midnight. So we all agreed it was not acceptable. Everybody in class pitched in. And we all developed an action plan for her in order to start organizing her bedroom routine better and putting her children to bed at the appropriate time. And, you know, the literacy learners and all those mothers of many children, they were able to use their best experience and to apply their skills and connect those dots. Okay, so we are moving on, and we have not that much time left. I'm sorry about this, 15 minutes. So we finished talking about goal setting, and now we'll talk about informed learning activities. And a quick question for you in the chat box. What do you think the word informed stands for in this concept? Please type in the chat box your ideas. Informed learning. What does this mean? Informed learning activities are at the core of the PBLA. An informed activity is one where the learners are aware of its aims so that they realize what and why they are doing it and how it can be helpful in their life outside the classroom. So therefore, it always has a useful outcome that learners are aware of, and you have just said this, awareness. If the activity leaves the learner in the dark about its importance or relevance, then it's blind. So there are a few things that we could do to scaffold informed learning and develop the activities that best suit the learner needs and are based on the individual learning goals. So certainly one tip is to start with the authentic resources. Do not fear using the real-life materials. They can be simplified or modified in order to suit the needs and proficiency of the learner. They're still considered authentic as long as the task that learners have to complete serves a real-life purpose. So on this slide, I'd like to share with you two examples. We love forms, and the form that I have here is slightly more complicated. So I would, with phase 1, I would start with a much easier form with less items in it. But what's great about forms, they're relevant, they're very useful. Our adult learners have to deal with lots of forms. They are authentic. And once your learners master these forms, there's also a good step to start doing the digital forms. Another idea would be using the videos from the Weather Network and checking the weather forecast in their local city, because and since we are doing as a part of the morning routine every time we check the date and day of the week and the temperature, when we finally get to the computer lab at the end of the week, and we have one computer class a week, learners watch the videos and they are able to record a few words that they understand, such as the days of the week, the temperature, the date, and the city where they live in. I've also developed a handout for them to help them watch and replay the video if necessary. Another tip here would be collecting everything that seems to be relevant and useful for learners. However, what I have just started doing, and also I borrowed this idea from the original coach, is asking learners to bring their own language samples. And today's technology allows us to document almost everything. For those learners who have a mobile device, some of them may be able to use it. I have 2 learners out of 15 who have one cell phone, one smartphone, and suggest taking pictures, teach them if they don't know how to do this. And bring pictures in class of the language that they encounter in their lives at the working clinic, grocery store, traffic lights. They do not have a mobile device, no problem. Ask them to bring in the notices or letters that they have to respond to. And this way, learning indeed becomes learner-driven, interesting, and useful. So you can always harness the language that learners outsource from real lives and keeping a grammar or vocabulary logs. And the idea is very simple. So, for example, every time learners encounter new vocabulary, they can fill or update their vocabulary log, set up a date for them to review it. They will check off the words that they already know, they're confident about, or they will cross words that they need to learn. They can review this individually with a partner, make it a little bit more exciting. For the grammar log idea, because there are certain challenges teaching grammar to learners, and I found that the best way to do is the opportunity, when the opportunity comes up, when the learners realize something by themselves. So in this case, the learner has just realized that the plural form of the word I is eyes, and record this in the learning log. I want to remind you that literacy learners will need your assistance and guidance in order to be able to use their skills, their literacy skills. So here, there is something I have to tell you. If you realize that this is a good opportunity, if you see this is a key vocabulary, tell them to grab their highlighter, to highlight it, and put it down in their grammar log or vocabulary log. Direct them as many times as necessary until they develop this ability to use it by themselves. So, going back to the meaning of the informed activity, so there are certain steps that we can ensure that learning tasks have an informed character. It is important to prepare learners for the task. It can be done by asking learners to identify things that they need to do on the task. Let's say write their first and last names on the application form. A little remark here is that if learners are not able to answer these questions when you ask them, it means they're not ready. Probably require more practice. So then ask them if they can do what is required of them. For example, write their own first and last name. If they can, ask them where they can check the spelling of their names. For example, on an ID. As a routine, we always do a checklist of things that need to be done. We do it orally as a whole class until the learners develop the ability to work with the checklist individually. After they have completed the task, I ask them to go over their checklist one more time to see whether they completed all the requirements. And I direct them to do this. So then I would look at the task together with each individual learner, go through the checklist of the criteria, and then together we will decide what is that needs to be done next and record it under the next step. So we're just in a minute, we're going to proceed. So here is an example for you, and I'm going to, just give me a second. Yeah, I'm going to maximize it a little bit for you. So let's say the learner expressed interest in a health topic. Then during the goal setting activity, the learner chose the reading skill focus and specifically set the goal to be able to read and understand medical labels, and also brought you a package of the medicine given to the learner by her family doctor and when her child was sick. So I used the original package, and many of you may recognize it on the bottom right, to develop a class handout geared at the level of the learner +1. I have also prioritized 4 things, could be 3 or 2 or 1, depends on the level of the learner. So in my case, we worked with age, caution, dosage, and expiry date. And I'm going to show you the front page of it. So you see age, caution, dosage, and expiry date. So this has been our priority for quite a long time. So on the left, you can see a checklist of things. So here I can read and understand age, caution, dosage, expiry date. So how it works, every time I would ask them, so can you understand and read the age? And they say yes. Obviously check, put a check mark in the chat box, but with the only condition that they have to go back to their front page, and if they say they can understand the age, they circle the age. If they say that they understand caution, they circle caution. So after going through the checklist, the learner will be able to complete this chart as they have already mentioned and circled all the things on their front page, and even discuss a few questions with a partner. For example, is this medicine for children or for adults, or if the expiry date is okay. So I see the message from Catherine, and she tells me there is 3 minutes left. Okay, excellent. Sorry. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fast forward to the last slide. There are a few things that I haven't managed to tell you, but I would certainly love to tell you. And therefore, this handout will be available for you to review. Okay, just a sec, and I will be back here. So I'd like to finish today's session with the emphasis on the importance of developing learner beliefs and their capabilities. The competency-based learning involves developing learner ability to integrate appropriate skills, knowledge, behaviors to accomplish real-life tasks. Together with learning management, engaging with others, self-efficacy beliefs are substantial in learner success in the classroom and life. It motivates the learner to improve. The research shows that personal accomplishments require not only skills and knowledge, but also beliefs in own capabilities to use them well. I believe that PBLA framework sets the environment for developing self-efficacy beliefs. I am often asked how I find time to do all of this in the classroom. Well, I do not really need to find time for this. At a certain point, building learner confidence, independence, self-efficacy has become a priority in my class, and therefore the needs assessment, goal setting, self-evaluation, learning reflection, informed learning activities have become an integral part of my instructional design and feedback my lesson planning practices. So here we are at our last stop, and this is the end of the presentation. I am going to come back on the camera, start sharing. Hello again. So this is one of the last slides, and I recommend, if you're interested in exploring a little bit more about goal setting, about modeling, about self-efficacy, I would recommend you checking the works of Bandura and Shank, and of course, Portfolio-Based Language Assessment Guide for Teachers in Progress by Joan Perez. And remember, good things take time. I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to hear from you. My Twitter is @StansSL. I have 2 blogs. Please get in touch. And I will also share my email in the chat box. Email me. I'll be more than happy to share with you my slides and the PDF with all the resources. Catherine, please.
Svetlana, I can't tell you how much people have enjoyed this presentation. The chat box has been on fire. So much useful stuff. People love the forms and worksheets that you were presenting. The visuals were great. So I think on behalf of all the participants here today, a big, big round of applause and a thank you very much. I encourage everybody to continue the conversation with each other and with Svetlana through Twitter, her blogs, through email, and on Tutela, and also to share what you learned today with your colleagues who were unable to attend or who are not online. I think that there's a lot here that is worth passing on and sharing. So again, thank you very much, Svetlana.